So recently, the anime for Stone Ocean has been confirmed at the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the animation special event, Joestar's The Inherited Souls, which, if you watch the event live, your thoughts might have been drifting off to other places at one point or another. And one thing I started to think about was the currently running part of JoJo, that being Part 8, JoJolion, and how it's been running for roughly 10 years now, starting even before David Production announced they were making a Part 1 and 2 anime. And that means, while the last 10 years have passed, we've been able to see grand moments in the manga brought to life in animated form, while Gappy was exploring the unknowns of his own story. So I wanted to look back at the major events of JoJo and see how they lined up with what was going on in JoJolion at that time. This is every major moment in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure that occurred during JoJolion's run. So I'll lay out the structure for the idea of this video before I get directly into it. As JoJolion is a monthly series, while the anime is a weekly release, I'll have to pick out major events or moments from each part's anime, and then find the corresponding JoJolion chapter that occurred within that month. While sometimes the episode will occur first or the JoJolion chapter will, they are close enough that I feel like this is the only way to compare them. So let's start first with the announcement of both the anime and the PS3 fighting game All-Star Battle, occurring on July 5th of 2012, during the JoJo 25th anniversary, which also occurred during the same time as the Hidehiko Araki JoJo Exhibit 2012, which was all happening around the time of Chapter 13, The Pursuer, later known as Paisley Park and Born This Way Part 2, where Gappy began to fight off Born This Way, and we see Yasuo with a bite mark, implying that she has stand potential going forward. Though following this chapter of JoJolion, the series went on hiatus. Though 2 months later, both would return, and we would have our debut of the first episode of the TV anime on October 6th, and soon after, on October 20th, Dio would reject his humanity and kickstart a generations-long duel with the Joestar family. And while this was all happening, Gappy was still dealing with Born This Way, only up to Chapter 15 of JoJolion. Then next month came, and on November 24th, Jonathan would defeat Dio for the first time, blasting him off the balcony to his doom below. And at that same month, Chapter 16 of JoJolion would drop, and Gappy would uncover the Born This Way's user, this being the Higashikata household maid, Kei Nijimura, who was mistakenly called Kyo Nijimura due to a mistake in publishing of her name at the time, though Gappy learning this information led him down to partially learning his own split identity, beginning one of the first major steps in JoJolion's journey. Then we reached December, where not only did we see Jonathan die with Dio in his arms on the 1st, but also the introduction of Joseph Joestar on the 8th, which all occurred around Chapter 17 of JoJolion, in which Gappy begins to learn more about himself as Kei shows him the fusion that takes place on the ground where he was buried, resulting in one of the most famous moments in JoJolion, that being the lemon and the tangerine. Though soon enough we would enter 2013, and on January 5th to the 12th, Joseph would not only face off against Santana, but the major threat of Part 2, the Pillarmen, would awaken. Meanwhile, JoJolion Chapter 18 would drop, and Gappy and Joshu would find themselves entering the dangerous location known as Shakedown Road. Then, of course, we would reach one of the most important moments in Part 2. On February 23rd, Caesar Zappelli met his end when Wamu used Rock Tomb, and Caesar, being the bug type that he was, it was super effective, killing him instantly. Cars gained partial EXP because Wamu is always wearing his EXP share. Oh, and Gappy and Joshu were on break at that time, so moving on. As we do move on, we get to April 6th, which is the end of Part 2's anime and the first season of the JoJo animated series as a whole. This sees Joseph defeating Cars by sheer luck and determination, sending him outwards into the cold, vast depths of space. This occurred around the time of Chapter 20 in JoJolion, where Gappy and Joshu finished off the Shakedown Road arc. From here, the JoJo anime would see roughly a year-long break between parts, returning on April 5th of 2014 with the first episode of Stardust Crusader, and April would end with the Crusaders leaving on their journey to Egypt on April 26th. This was around the time of Chapter 31 of JoJolion, which established the new antagonist group, the Rock Humans, and fully began the I Am a Rock fight. Then soon after, on May 2nd, fan favorite Jean-Pierre Polnareff would join the Crusaders, which happened around the same time as I Am a Rock's fight came to its conclusion in Chapter 32 of JoJolion, which also gave us a glimpse into a fragment of what a lokakaka fruit is like. Then came June, which from the 6th to the 13th, Whole Horse would appear, kill smaller Abdal, then vanish. Along with this, Polnareff would get his revenge on J-Guile, which all occurred around chapter 33 of JoJolion, where we get to see the Higashikata's oldest son, Joben, introduced fully for the first time. Then on July 26, the biggest beatdown in part 3 would occur, where Jotaro would deliver justice to the bastard known as Steely Dan, which is the longest single beatdown in the anime for a good bit, and in JoJolion, chapter 34 would release and kickstart one of the coolest arcs in the whole part, this being Beetle Tendency. And on August 1st, the Crusaders would find themselves facing off against their hardest opponent yet, one that put every tarot card to shame, this being the sun. And while the Crusaders were racking their brains to overcome this ultimate defense, chapter 35 dropped and Joben and Gappy continued one of the best arcs in JoJolion, where they engaged in a beetle fight where they were both using their stands to win while trying to hide the fact that they were both stand users from each other. It's like the coolest fucking arc in JoJolion. Then next month would come, and the Stardust Crusaders anime would reach the end of its first season on September 12th, which sadly, September was also a month where JoJolion was on hiatus. But, luckily enough, the anime would return soon enough on January 9th of 2015, and the first episode of Season 2 would introduce the final Crusader, Iggy the Fool, while JoJolion was actually showing us for the first time what the Lokakaka can do in Chapter 39, which features the first instance of equivalent exchange on screen. Along with this, it began the Dubiwa fight itself. Then in March, we see one of the most famous Jotaro moments brought to life, his gamble against Darby the Gambler on the 13th of March, which was later followed up by Whole Horse's return on the 27th, which coincided with chapter 41 of JoJolion, where the battle against Dubiwa began to ramp up, as Asho tries to contact Joben, while Yasuo and Tsurugi are fighting to escape their pursuer, Dubiwa. From here, on May 8th to the 22nd, the Crusaders would lose their first two members, Iggy and Abdal, taken out by Vanilla Ice, and during this time, chapter 43 would release of JoJolion, which was honestly almost the polar opposite of what was happening in the anime, as it saw the aftermath of the Dubiwa fight, and the reunion of both Josuke and Yasuo, who have been separated for quite a while in the manga. And then of course, the introduction of Carrera, the Yukako stand-in for this part, and it's also the first time that we see her stand, Love Love Deluxe, so a lot of things happened in chapter 43. Then in June, something special happened. The end of part 3 and chapter 44 of JoJolion linked up on the same day, so while Jotaro was finishing off Dio and ending a decades-long battle with a monstrous vampire, Gappy was learning the name of his original body and his history with Kira and Carrera, though the JoJo anime would go on hiatus for a bit following the end of part 3, until October 24th of that year, the Last Crusaders anime event would reveal that part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable, was getting a TV anime, which occurred around the same time as chapter 48 of JoJolion that takes place during the opening act of the Damo fight, where Yasuo uncovers that Damo is using Josufumi's name for his own identity, and Joshu gets flushed down the drain. And soon enough, we reach April of 2016, and from the 1st to the 15th, all three main characters of Part 4 would be introduced. And while people were just getting to know Josuke in Part 4, JoJolion Chapter 53 would arrive, showing us the origins of Gappy and how Josufumi and Kira ended up trapped underground, fusing together. Then finally came June 3rd, where we got to see Josuke fix some spaghetti for the first time in animated form, which was around the same time that Gappy would help Hato fix her own boyfriend in Chapter 55, which also was the same chapter that Kato made her debut in the manga. Then we finally reached July, and from the 1st to the 22nd we would end up meeting two major characters, both Rohan and Kira, whose introduction coincides with Chapter 56 of JoJolion, the beginning of the Milagro Man arc, which is a Joshu-focused arc. And then we reach August 26, where we actually end up getting inside Kira's own head and seeing what leads him to doing what he does. All the while, Chapter 57 of JoJolion happens, and we actually get to see Joshu's own internal monologues himself, after he ends the Milagro Man arc. Then on September 9th, Yoshikage Kira's identity is fully uncovered and he's forced to go into hiding, changing his face and escaping his fate. Meanwhile, in JoJolion, Chapter 58 comes out and we see Kato return home for the first time in 15 years, where she reveals her plans for the future to her family. And then we reach November 25th, where one of the most iconic arcs in Part 4 would begin. Another One Bites the Dust, which sadly occurred during an off month for JoJolion, but was right around the beginning of the Blue Lagoon arc, which resulted in a lot of people creating a lot of dumb fan theories. And finally, on December 23rd, the Golden Heart of Morio would outshine the evil of Yoshikage Kira in the final episode of Part 4, Diamond is Unbreakable, which occurred the same month as JoJolion's return, and we would learn more about Dolomity's own backstory and how his Blue Hawaii stand works. Along with this, we also learned in part what Jobin's main motivation for the rest of the part is. From here, the JoJo anime would hit one of the biggest droughts to come, this being the silence between Part 4 and Part 5's adaptation, which ended on June 21st of 2018, when Hidehiko Araki himself would confirm at the end of Ripples of Adventure art exhibit that Part 5 would be getting an anime adaptation that began airing October of that year. This reveal happened the same month as JoJolion Chapter 76, which saw the end of the Ozone Baby fight, with Tsurugi and Jobin coming out as the victors of the whole confrontation. And then we finally reach October, the beginning of Part 5, and from the 5th to the 26th, we end up meeting the whole crew. Meanwhile, Chapter 80 of JoJolion would release, and Mitsuba, the wife of Jobin, would discover that she was forced to undergo a Lokakaka exchange, which costed her the life of her unborn child, and in response to this, she shows off just what her stand, Awaken 3 Leaves, can do. Then from here we reach November 30th, and Bruno earns his rank as Capo and Passione, and Part 5 story really begins, which coincides with Chapter 81 of JoJolion, which has Mitsuba and Yasuo locating Dr. Wu's own records on the Lokakaka, and how dangerous they are to use without the proper procedure. Next we jump from November to February 15th of 2019, when Giorno and Mista faced off against White Album, a turning point in the story of Part 5 as we see Giorno take up his role as the gang's guiding light for the first time, and it's also just one of the best fights in the whole of the series, which sadly has no JoJolion chapter to coincide with it, but it came right after probably two of the biggest reveals in Part 8's current story. Firstly, the name of the head doctor, and second, the flash forward to some awful events at the Higashikata household. Then we reach March 1st, where Bruno's gang has abandoned Passione and Fugo makes his exit from the story. And while this was happening, Chapter 84 had released, which had Wonder of You and the head doctor appearing in person for the first time, along with some interactions between Yasuo and Toru to reinforce that they have some previous relationship. And then on April, we continue the trend of loss, as Abakio would die on April 26th. While the JoJolion Chapter 85 would release, the head doctor would show up in multiple places at once, appearing at both the hospital and the Higashikata estate, along with Mitsuba discovering that Jobin has a Lokakaka growing in his room. Of course, this is also the first time we see the effect of Calamity take place, and this happens to Mamazuku Rai as he tries to pursue the head doctor. Then May 24th comes around, and one of the biggest events that manga readers have been waiting for since Part 5's announcement occurs, this being the 7-page Muta beatdown, and it takes the place as the longest single beatdown in the entirety of the anime, though instead of Gappy fighting beetles like the last time this occurred, he instead is in a little bit of hot water after another string of calamities occur during Chapter 87 of JoJolion. Along with this, Odro, the fun stan user from the very beginning of the part, returns, and plans from his hot tub to attack the Higashikata estate. And then we reach June 7th, where Diavolo reveals himself and kickstarts the part's own finale, while JoJolion Chapter 87 releases, and Odro begins his assault on the Higashikata estate, fighting against both Tsurugi and Jobin, and forcing them into a bit of a bind when he reveals that he is after the Lokakaka that Jobin has. And in July, from the 5th to the 28th, we see not only Giorno awaken to his Gold Experience Requiem, but also awake himself from being a sleeping slave of fate, ending Part 5's anime's run, while Chapter 88 of JoJolion shows that Gappy is AFK. But Jobin and Tsurugi are still fighting Ojiro, and when things look hopeless, Jobin reveals how his stand truly works, as it has a limited activation range, but it can store heat on objects that he can then trigger at long distances, showing just how dangerous he really is. And then from here, we reach the JoJo anime's biggest drought yet. For 616 days, we would receive nothing regarding the anime, until April 4th of 2021, where the Joestar Inherited Soul event would take place, and not only would Part 6 get confirmed, but we also learn who was playing Jolyne, which this event will have its own JoJolion chapter later this month. But JoJolion's been going on for roughly 10 years now, and 2 of those years were dedicated to what is this nearly 20-chapter deep arc about Wonder of You, which appears to be approaching its own climax soon. Though, JoJolion didn't just see anime adaptations in its 10-year lifespan. No, it saw so much more. So let's discuss a few events that started and ended during JoJolion's run. Starting first with the 25th anniversary of JoJo, with the Versus JoJo light novel events, which saw Purple Haze Feedback releasing on September 17th of 2011, the same day as Chapter 4 of JoJolion released. Then you have Over Heaven on December 16th that same year, that was around the time of Chapter 7's release, and then of course we have the infamous George Joestar, and the booklet bundle 25 Years with JoJo releasing on September of 2012, which corresponded with Chapter 12 of JoJolion, followed later that year by the Holy JoJo Veller releasing on September 9th of 2013, which is around the time of Chapter 24. Hell, even the JoJo Veller released publicly the year later on April 8th in 2014, which corresponded with Chapter 31 of JoJolion at that point. JoJolion then also got to see the 30th anniversary of JoJo, which saw events such as August 12th to September 10th, where Araki's hometown of Sendai renamed itself to celebrate what happened, where at that same time in JoJolion, Gappy, Yasuo, and Mamazuku Rai were all dealing with urban guerrilla. And then of course we have multiple video games, movies, escape rooms, all releasing alongside multiple Gucci crossovers since 2011. JoJolion has always been there, slowly going its own pace, and in some way is as old as JoJo's mainstream popularity in the West is, funny enough. With that in mind, Gappy has been there to see all of his spiritual ancestors' journeys all the way through, even dubbed in other languages. JoJolion has sort of been a constant for JoJo, being the longest running part by sheer length alone, so it'll be a strange day when it finally concludes, though hopefully, Gappy can help see Jolyne through to the conclusion of her own story before he ends his, because I think that would tie a nice bow off for JoJolion's own history with the anime. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this little video. I sort of wanted to celebrate the announcement of Stone Ocean while also looking at JoJo as a whole, as JoJo is very important to me and it has become a big thing in my life, obviously. And so it's kind of nice to reflect on how long the thing I've been reading has been going on. Though before I end this video, I feel like it's vital that I thank the JoJo Wiki at jojowiki.com. Almost entirely thanks to their amazing archive of information that this video was at all possible. It is a fan-funded and run wiki site separate from Wikia and deserves all the support in the world. They put most, if not all, other fan wikis to shame with the amount of hard work and detail that goes into making this website run as well as it does. Please, go show them some support over at their website. Love those guys. They didn't even ask me to do this. I'm doing this because of how much help they've been to my channel as a whole. Now, if you want to support more videos like this in the future, and help support my channel in the oncoming future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. To pledge to it, even just a little bit helps this channel flow as smoothly as it does. And funny enough, did you know that there was another series that has started and ended during JoJolion's own run? That's right, Shimonetta, A Boring World Where the Concept of Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist, debuted July 18th of 2012, which was around the time of Chapter 13 of JoJolion, so hopefully with that knowledge in mind, that'll compel you to pick up a copy of Shimonetta yourself.